Former Special Counsel Jack Smith appeared before a Republican-controlled House panel on Thursday to address questions regarding two criminal cases he initiated against President Donald Trump. Both cases were subsequently withdrawn following Trump's re-election, in accordance with Department of Justice policy prohibiting the prosecution of sitting presidents. Smith testified under oath that President Trump was charged because evidence indicated he willfully violated federal law. The first case alleged Trump conspired to overturn his 2020 election defeat, while the second accused him of unlawfully retaining classified documents after leaving office. Neither case proceeded to trial. During his testimony, Smith stated that rather than accepting the 2020 election results, Trump engaged in what prosecutors characterized as a criminal scheme to overturn the outcome and prevent the lawful transfer of power. Republican lawmakers challenged Smith's investigation, with House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan suggesting Smith abandoned proper procedures due to political timing ahead of the 2024 election. Democratic ranking member Jamie Raskin defended Smith's conduct and decisions. Two significant developments have emerged simultaneously in separate jurisdictions, creating what legal observers describe as unprecedented transparency into the evidence underlying the criminal investigations. These developments involve the public release of previously sealed evidence in Georgia and the publication of Smith's complete congressional testimony in Washington. Together, they represent the most comprehensive evidentiary disclosure regarding the cases against Trump since investigations began, even though criminal proceedings have been halted. A Georgia state court judge has issued a formal ruling allowing public disclosure of substantial evidence gathered in the Fulton County election interference case. Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee's order, dated January 10, 2026, permits the release of materials that have remained sealed since the investigation's inception. The evidence includes recordings of conversations, text messages, and internal campaign documents. Prosecutors maintain these materials demonstrate a coordinated, multi-state criminal conspiracy involving efforts to pressure election officials, organize alternate slates of presidential electors, and overturn certified results from the 2020 presidential election. Until Judge McAfee's ruling, only prosecutors and defense attorneys representing Trump and 18 co-defendants had access to this evidence. The unsealing makes these materials available to the American public and media organizations for the first time in the case's history. The Georgia case has faced multiple procedural challenges and delays. However, the court's decision to unseal evidence represents a significant development in transparency, regardless of whether criminal proceedings ultimately resume. Legal analysts note that unsealed evidence in criminal cases can serve multiple purposes beyond immediate prosecution, including historical record-keeping and potential use in future legal proceedings. The evidence now being released was gathered through extensive investigation by the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. It encompasses communications and documentation spanning the period between the November 2020 election and the January 2021 certification of electoral results. Prosecutors have indicated the materials reveal conversations and planning among multiple individuals regarding strategies to challenge election outcomes in Georgia and other states. Concurrent with the Georgia evidence unsealing, former Special Counsel Jack Smith's complete deposition transcript and congressional testimony have become public record. The deposition transcript exceeds 250 pages, documenting more than 8 hours of questioning. Smith delivered additional live sworn testimony before Congress on January 22, 2026. Smith's statements represent some of the most direct assertions by a federal prosecutor regarding alleged presidential criminal conduct in American history. He testified that his investigative team assembled proof meeting the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, the highest evidentiary threshold in the criminal justice system required for criminal conviction. Under oath and penalty of perjury, Smith stated that Donald Trump personally engaged in criminal activity to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. Additionally, Smith testified that Trump unlawfully retained classified national defense documents at his Mar-a-Lago residence after leaving office. Smith characterized Trump as by a significant margin the most culpable and responsible individual in this conspiracy. He emphasized that Trump was not a peripheral figure or someone caught up in events beyond his control, but rather the central actor in the alleged criminal conduct. The special counsel further noted that many crucial witnesses in his investigation were not Democrats or Trump's political opponents. Instead, Smith testified that key witnesses included Republicans, state legislators, election officials, and GOP electors, individuals Smith described as people who prioritized allegiance to their country over party loyalty. These witnesses, according to Smith, were fully prepared to testify under oath in open court about Trump's actions and what they personally observed. The simultaneous release of physical evidence in Georgia and prosecutorial testimony in Washington creates an unusual situation in American legal history. In Georgia, court-ordered unsealing provides access to recordings, documentary proof, and internal communications showing what was discussed and planned during efforts to challenge the 2020 election results. In Washington, the lead federal prosecutor who investigated these matters has testified on the congressional record under oath that evidence proves Trump committed crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. Smith stated that criminal convictions would likely have resulted except for constitutional complications following Trump's 2024 election victory. Legal scholars observe that these developments constitute what could be characterized as a public shadow trial. Evidence and sworn testimony are being placed before the American people, even though actual criminal proceedings have been frozen or dismissed due to constitutional and political considerations surrounding the prosecution of a sitting president. This situation has no direct precedent in American democratic history. Never before has a lead federal prosecutor testified under oath that a sitting president committed provable crimes, meeting the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, while simultaneously a state court unseals physical documentary evidence supporting identical allegations in a separate jurisdiction. The developments create a comprehensive public record despite the absence of ongoing criminal trials. Prosecutors and judges are making the complete factual record available to the public through mechanisms other than traditional courtroom proceedings, with judges, juries, and binding verdicts. This approach establishes a permanent historical record that will shape how future generations understand this period. The documentation exists in official, legally authenticated forms that will remain accessible regardless of immediate legal outcomes. The evidence now in the public domain is described by those who assembled and reviewed it as both overwhelming and legally damning. However, this evidence is not currently being tested through traditional criminal proceedings due to significant institutional and constitutional barriers. Department of Justice policy prohibits the criminal prosecution of sitting presidents. This policy, while not a constitutional requirement, has guided DOJ practice across multiple administrations. The policy's application means that, regardless of evidence strength, federal prosecutors cannot pursue criminal charges against a sitting president. Additionally, recent Supreme Court rulings on presidential immunity have created substantial legal protections for presidents regarding actions taken while in office. These rulings complicate potential prosecutions related to presidential conduct even after a president leaves office. The combination of DOJ policy and Supreme Court precedent effectively places a sitting president beyond the immediate reach of the criminal justice system for alleged crimes committed while in or in connection with presidential duties. No previous situation in American history has involved a sitting president being described under oath by the lead federal prosecutor who investigated him as having committed provable crimes exceeding the beyond a reasonable doubt evidentiary standard, while simultaneously a state court unseals physical documentary evidence supporting those allegations, yet no criminal trial occurs or appears likely. This represents uncharted constitutional territory. The mechanism through which this shadow trial is proceeding, through public documents and sworn testimony, rather than formal courtroom proceedings, creates a permanent historical record that will fundamentally influence how future generations assess this period in American governance. Jack Smith placed deliberate emphasis throughout his congressional testimony on the role of Republican witnesses in his investigation. Legal analysts consider this emphasis strategically important and substantively significant for the long-term credibility of the evidentiary record. Trump and political allies have consistently characterized criminal investigations as partisan witch hunts, politically motivated persecution by Democrats against a Republican president for electoral purposes. Smith's testimony directly addresses this defense by establishing under oath that the prosecution's case substantially relied on Republican testimony. Key witnesses included Republican state legislators, Republican election officials serving in Republican-controlled state governments, and GOP electors who were lifelong party members and Trump supporters. These individuals had no apparent partisan motivation to fabricate testimony against a president from their own party whom they had personally supported and voted for. Smith testified that these Republicans made deeply personal decisions to prioritize allegiance to country and constitution over loyalty to any individual politician. This willingness to come forward, according to Smith, made the prosecution's case legally powerful and difficult to dismiss as partisan overreach. When key witnesses prepared to testify against a defendant are loyal members of that defendant's own political coalition, speaking about what they personally witnessed, the partisan motivation defense becomes substantially weakened. Smith's testimony suggests that the evidence derives credibility from the political affiliations and prior loyalties of those providing it, rather than being undermined by them. This aspect of Smith's testimony may prove consequential for how the evidentiary record is evaluated over time, particularly as historical assessments replace immediate political reactions. The evidence being unsealed in Georgia and testimony being published in Washington create what legal observers describe as a comprehensive accountability infrastructure. This infrastructure will remain available beyond Trump's current presidency and could be utilized by future institutional actors pursuing legal or political accountability. The Georgia evidence, including recordings, documents, and communications, can potentially be used by state prosecutors who may bring the currently stalled criminal case to trial if and when legal obstacles to prosecuting a current or former president no longer apply to Trump's situation. Smith's sworn congressional testimony, now permanently part of the official congressional record, can be cited by future congressional committees conducting oversight hearings, impeachment proceedings, or legislative investigations into events surrounding January 6th and the classified documents matter. The comprehensive documentary record being assembled through these developments constitutes a detailed evidentiary archive capturing a complete factual record of alleged presidential criminal conduct. This archive exists in forms that are permanent, publicly accessible, and legally authenticated through official judicial and congressional proceedings. The evidentiary value does not diminish because criminal trials were halted before reaching verdicts. Evidence validity does not decrease due to institutional barriers preventing jury presentation. Recordings remain authentic, documents remain genuine, and witness testimony retains its credibility, regardless of whether it was formally presented in criminal court. This permanent record will be available for examination by historians, journalists, legal scholars, and future prosecutors or investigators. The authentication of this evidence through official legal processes gives it particular weight as historical documentation. Evidence that Donald Trump committed federal and state crimes in connection with efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election is now permanently part of the public record of the United States. A former special counsel has testified under oath that assembled proof meets and exceeds the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. A state court judge has ordered physical evidence unsealed for public examination. Republican witnesses have confirmed central facts of the alleged conspiracy, yet the individual identified by this evidence as the principal actor currently holds the office of President of the United States. As sitting president, Trump exercises the full powers of the executive branch while shielded from criminal prosecution by DOJ institutional policy and Supreme Court immunity rulings. He is protected from impeachment and removal by partisan congressional dynamics and faces no realistic prospect of criminal accountability in the immediate future. The gap between documented evidence of alleged serious criminal wrongdoing and the absence of legal consequences for the person identified as the principal perpetrator represents a defining tension in current American governance. Legal scholars note that this situation raises fundamental questions about the practical application of the rule of law when the alleged perpetrator holds the nation's highest office. Traditional mechanisms of criminal accountability appear suspended, not due to lack of evidence, but due to constitutional and institutional considerations surrounding presidential power. This unprecedented situation will be examined and debated by constitutional scholars, historians, and citizens for years to come. The resolution of this tension, whether through eventual accountability mechanisms or through precedent establishing that certain presidential conduct remains beyond legal consequence, will significantly shape understanding of American constitutional governance.